Good morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 on Friday. It's time for Coffee with Karl, but today we've got a special episode. We have rebranded today's time together as Tea with Tracy. And so I'd like to welcome Tracy Zhao, the TRIDEC team this morning. Good morning, Tracy.
Good morning, Karl. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for making this happen. Tracy always makes it happen. Tracy's the originator, producer, director, all the above for Coffee with Karl. But as you might have saw in the slides coming in, this week is International Economic Development Council's Economic Development Week. And so we thought today, we're gonna spend some time together talking about economic development, how we work together with all of our teammates here in the Tri-Cities to do it as TRIDEC, and a little bit of the TRIDEC history and kind of what we do just to bring a brighter light on economic development. I know with Coffee with Karl, since we started it over a year ago now, we've had on different guests, and we always try to reference how it ties into what we do in economic development. But I think today we're going to get a little bit deeper into that and just have a good conversation. And Tracy's came up with this awesome idea where Tracy's going to interview me. So this will be a first of a kind. I'll try to be entertaining and you know, it won't just be like a death by PowerPoint, which was plan A, and this is plan B. I think plan B is going to be a lot better.
So I saved you all. So thank you, Tracy. No, I'm excited, and congratulations, Karl, because this has been a really big year for you. Not only have you been here for 15 months, during our quarantine and shutdown, you actually did something pretty amazing that a lot of economic developers don't get the opportunity to do that. You actually became a certified economic development, or a CXD. So congratulations on that. So that's exciting.
Thanks, Tracy. I was raised to be humble, and my humility, both in naming the show Coffee with Karl and now, pointing out that I'm a certified economic developer, is hard for me to deal with, but I thank you. I really appreciate it. It was, I'll just say this is the best job I've ever had. And my family and I are so excited to be here in the Tri-Cities. And such a big part of that is both our TRIDEC team, which, Tracy, you're a key part of that, as well as the rest of our team, but then the partners that we have in economic development. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. We all work together to pull together for the Tri-Cities, and that's what TRIDEC's always been about. And that's what we'll talk about today. So I don't know who's going to be, making the shots here, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump into our coffee cup discussion. And you gave me this one. It comes from one of our economic development partners that we work with, GIS Planning, but I think it says economic development superheroes. And again, on humility, we don't necessarily have to claim the superhero, but we do, claim the economic development work that we do. And that's our discussion today. So that's my coffee cup. And Tracy, tea with Tracy, I'm guessing you're drinking tea?
I am drinking tea in my nice new Mother's Day cup. So my husband and my son got me this beautiful cup. Of course, it's from Starbucks. Those that know me know that I'm pretty much addicted to Starbucks. So I'm pretty happy to please. If you need anything from me, just get me a coffee and I'm good to go. And so they know how much I have so many mugs and stuff, and they saw this and they're like, oh, mom's gonna like that. So that's what they got me, and some other stuff. But
it's a perfect gift.
Yeah, and drinking some tea. So it's nice. I've had a couple of cups of coffee this morning. So tea is good. It's calming me down. So
very nice. I like the colors in it because it reminds me of like kind of that 80s artwork. Like I'm thinking the cover of Duran Duran, which kind of goes along with the celebration theme. And, being somebody that went to high school and college in the 80s, I love the 80s.
Yeah, I was born in 1980. So this year it was a big year for me because I turned 40. So yay, celebrate. I'm excited. But, I'm so glad that we're here. For those that know me, they know that economic development is actually really important to me. I do believe all of our partners, we are little superheroes, because the work that we do, it's not necessarily seen and appreciated, but everybody enjoys it. And so when I start talking about economic development, I swear people's eyes kind of like gloss over, and they're like, what exactly do you do? And I start going into it, and like 20 minutes later, after I'm done explaining it, they're like, oh, okay. So as the most recent CXD certified economic developer, do you want to talk about what is economic development?
I do. And just what you just talked about, explaining to people when you say economic development, their eyes glaze over. I think that's been part of my experience too. I was a failed elected official back in Idaho, but I found, and I think it's very true, and it's positive. Like there's no one that's running for office or is in a public role that will ever be against economic development. And just that's a very broad definition. But when you really break it down, and that was my experience as well. It's kind of how I got into it, because I met people that were doing it, had a great opportunity for me to transition. It's been, very, very good for me and my family, and then, good for projects that we've been able to work on and bring some projects to bear. But ultimately, it's about growth. It's about economic growth, which usually is a lot of times measured in job growth, but then, enhancement of wealth. And so that's usually like an increase in wages. And that's one of the things we focus on as we think about companies that we can help grow here that are already here, or bring them in, or even startups. We really look and highlight companies that are going to pay more than the prevailing wage or more than the median income, because that also helps us increase the wealth, the personal capital of individual families. And that's another way that we measure economic growth, really.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Honestly, it's about jobs and creating jobs for that. So looking at economic development and what our definition is, where does TRIDEC's role play into this? And how did we actually get started? Because it's an interesting story, and we do have Mark on here. So I guess if we mess up on the history, Mark, as the godfather of economic development, he'll be correcting us. But really, I think it's such a fascinating story of how a couple of people came together in 1963 and said, look, we got to do something. So Karl, I'll just kind of tee you off. Like, what is it? Because coming into the area and learning about TRIDEC and our history, what is it that really resonated with you?
Yeah, I'll and appreciate the fact that Mark's on. Mark Smith is a wealth of knowledge and expertise at economic development. He lives here in the Tri-Cities, and he's written some amazing books. One of the ones that I really enjoy is Community Godfather, and it's really about one of the founders of TRIDEC, Sam Volpentest. And it was cool for me because when I came to town to start the interview process, my predecessor, Carl Adrian, mentioned that there was this book out there and it talked about Sam Volpentest, and it kind of gave the history of TRIDEC. So I read it, and it helped me understand a lot of our history as a region, as a community, and really about Sam Volpentest and TRIDEC. But in 1963, Sam Volpentest, who was a businessman, he owned at least one bar at the time. Maybe he had two bars at the time, and he owned different businesses throughout the Tri-Cities, and the publisher of the Tri-City Herald, and one other gentleman. So essentially 3 people came together to start TRIDEC. And at that time we were called, the acronym was TRICNIC, or Tri-Cities Nuclear Industrial Council. And so you can see by the name that the focus at that time was really on Hanford and its role within the nuclear industry, or the atomic industry as we referred to it back then. And the goal was always growth as it applied to jobs. I think Sam's kind of mantra was jobs, jobs, jobs. What they did back then was Sam had a relationship with the Washington congressional delegation. Definitely Harry Magnuson, who was an amazing senator for Washington and had a long, long tenure, and then built relationships with the rest of the congressional delegation. And what they specifically did was lobbied through those congressional connections that they had, and made sure that funding and projects came to Hanford that aligned with what TRICNIC wanted to do. And one of those, an example of that was the Hanford Nuclear Industrial Park. And I know I'm forgetting the name of it, but essentially it kind of laid out a plan for Hanford so that it wasn't just about plutonium production. They wanted to add in electrical production. They knew that there was waste heat in the nuclear processes that were happening at Hanford to make plutonium. And so they came up with projects, worked with Department of Energy or the Atomic Energy Commission at the time, to add an electrical generating capacity to the AND reactor. And, in 1963, President Kennedy came out here late in the fall before he went to Dallas and launched that program. And so that connection between our community and the congressional staff, and then the federal government in the form of DOE and how that creates jobs and drives our economy is really how TRIDEC started in 1963.
I just think it's fascinating and how three men really just did something fantastic and left a legacy for that.
Totally.
And then a little bit more about economic development, because I think that it has really changed and evolved over the years. And traditionally, they called it the three-legged stool, where we focus just primarily on business recruitment, business retention and expansion, and then workforce development. But here in the Tri-Cities, obviously, and our roots of what we had to do, we really had to focus on community advocacy. If Sam didn't have that vision of saying, wait, we're advocating for the community, I honestly don't know what the Tri-Cities would look like. And I think that that's really important that we focus on that. And we do all sorts of things. And, obviously for our job, we're about diversifying the economy. And that's where the business recruitment comes in. And then your traditional BRE, that's where you can have the biggest growth in most markets. It's honestly easier to grow a company that's currently employing 80 employees to 100 versus bringing on an additional company of that 100 employee count. And then workforce development. I mean, we can't recruit any companies if we don't have skilled workforce. And then the advocacy on behalf of the community. So I think kind of leading into this, Karl, on our next conversation question is, let's talk about what TRIDEC is doing in each of these individual roles. So I think the fun, sexy part is obviously the recruitment when you're talking about, oh yeah, this and that. So do you want to talk about what you're doing in recruitment?
Yeah, for sure. And I might just also throw in one more thing, Tracy. In the mid 80s, I'm going to call it 1985, but that I don't know if that's the right year or not. TRIDEC actually merged with the chamber at the time, and then became TRIDEC, so Tri-City Development Council, and kind of grew into that role that you just discussed. Before we were really focused on the federal advocating as it, and creating jobs out of that. We added the other traditional economic development areas that you just talked about, and diversification is the biggest one. And I think I'm not going to answer your question, so let me come back to it. But I just did want to make one plug, because in an earlier Coffee with Karl, we had Mike Schwenk on, who had my role when TRIDEC was first formed in the 80s. And Mike talked about, and I got this number from Mike, that back then, when you looked at, and talking about the history of TRIDEC and everything else, the community was really driven by and totally, and not, I wouldn't say totally, but very, very dependent upon federal funding. And so the dollars that came through Department of Energy, both especially to Pacific Northwest National Lab, and then at that time to Hanford production efforts that then transitioned over time into Hanford cleanup efforts. But back in the 80s, about 25% of the total workforce for the Tri-Cities was directly tied into federal funding. And so you can see how that advocacy and making sure that the funding worked out every year was really critically important to driving our economy ahead. And because the average income in those federal jobs is about twice what our median is, which was true back then, it's true today, that those 25% of the workforce actually covered 50% of the dollars that were in the workforce. And so the latest numbers that we can get from that is 2018. So 3 years ago, those numbers had come down into half. And the point I'm trying to make is about diversification, which is our first part of our mission. And so in 2018, we were down to 11.3% of the total workforce that was tied into those direct federal dollars, and about 23.4% of the total wages in the workforce. And so I think that's a good measurement to say, like, we've been working on this diversification goal for a while. And it's all of us working together. We've taken that measurement in half over 35-ish years, and I think that's a good place to start. But in attraction, and you talk about the sexiness of it, and I think that's what a lot of people get in the political reference I had before. Like, we all think of, like, what's economic development? It's the governor coming out with the big scissors and cutting the ribbon on the new plan, right? And that's attraction and building companies that we're working with. We actively pursue, we have lead generators where we pay for a firm, and they look for companies that are growing that kind of fit our sectors that we look for, which includes agriculture and food processing, advanced manufacturing, and technology, and energy. Those are kind of our three base industries that we target those lead generations on. We do our best to make contact and market directly to those companies that we get. We also work with Washington Department of Commerce. We are an associate development organization. There's 39 counties in the state, and I think there's 33 ADOs, the acronym for Associate Development Organization, that have a contract with Commerce. And so through Commerce, there's a lot of companies that contact Department of Commerce, and then they pass the lead on to us. We work with our partners, which include, property owners, such as our ports and cities that own property, as well as individual landowners, and put together proposals for sites that we might have that might be a good fit for them, and feed that back. Our goal is to get somebody in town, have a site visit, we call it. That's a critical step in attracting companies, because we really feel like once we get them in town, now we can take them out to the amazing, see the wine country, see the wine bars. We can show them our community and the vibrancy that we have here. And so, that's the next step. It's not just about the site, the infrastructure, maybe incentives that we have, but it's also about, really selling them on our community. And what we found, and what I found in being relatively new, is that when you come into the Tri-Cities and you start to experience that quality of life that we have, it's no brainer. This is the place that you want to be. And so that's kind of generally how we do it, and what some of the industries that we're focused on for attraction.
Yeah. And I apologize, Karl. I think my ADHD kicked in. I'm so excited to talk about economic development. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe we should talk about TRIDEC and what our mission is. So let's rewind just a bit, awesome. and then get back into it. My bad, sorry. TRIDEC, a couple of years ago, our board of directors, we did go through some strategic planning, and we really kind of locked in on what our areas of focus is, and kind of looked at our mission and dialed that in. And Karl, I'll let you lead with the mission, because you, as the CEO and the certified economic development.
Yeah, no, like before I got here, I think the team and the board did a really good job of really solidifying who we are and what we do. And it really comes down to these three pillars that TRIDEC is about, and we try to categorize our work in those areas. So economic diversification, we just talked about diversifying, so that we have a broader scope of businesses here, not relying upon one industry. And just off the top of my head, I know that those federally supported jobs, both P&L through Department of Energy and the Hamper contractors and subcontractors, is our third leading industry. Fed funded jobs, government in general, which includes education, and some of the other sectors, is our number one employer sector. And number two, soon after that, is healthcare. So, with our three healthcare providers and hospitals, and then the network of providers throughout the community, it's number two. Federally funded jobs, number three. So diversification is one of our main pillars. We talked about federal advocacy. That's really our history and our roots. And there's so many things other than just federal funding for appropriations that come into P&L and Hanford that we advocate for on behalf of the community. There's also other federal issues that we're involved in, including Lower Snake River dams, making sure that those are going. We continue to work on the River Shore reconveyance back to the local municipalities and government entities. And we're all working together right now, trying to set up a meeting with the tribe to talk to them about we'd like them to be involved in the process, and trying to find a good way that we can all partner together and then reconvey these federal lands back to the local governments, that the land used to be part of their scope before the 1940s, when the Corps of Engineers came in and for flood control took control of that land. And then finally, creative leadership. And I think creative leadership is really one that, it sounds good, but like, what does it mean? I think it really means for us, talking about our history and our heritage, the things that we've done in the past, the things that we need to do in the future. We're really the center of collaboration. We have, in between our board, which is amazing, we have CEOs, leaders, managers, and elected officials that really drive our two counties forward, that make up our board. And between them and then the relationships that we have with other business organizations throughout the community, really is critical for creative leadership. And that's when that really comes into play, is when you have something you didn't see coming up, and you need to pull leadership together to come up with innovative ways to solve that problem. And that's been TRIDEC's history. That's part of what we do today. And we always look forward to those new challenges for creative leadership.
Yep. And I really like that TRIDEC is a unifying voice. And when you have in a jurisdiction, we have 2 counties, multiple cities, multiple ports, it's something that's important because when we're asking an elected official to go to bat for us, they want to make sure that they have community support. And they have that when TRIDEC is asking for it because we do have the buy-in from the people. So it is so important to have that one voice, one Tri-Cities in a sense. And it's fantastic the work that we can do. And really we're here and we're fostering economic development and prosperity. And I think for both of us, we're a little selfish doing this because we want to make sure that our kids and our grandkids have jobs and can live close to us. And I think we're just passionate about it. Talking about site selection and the actual true economic diversification, it's interesting as we are going through and we're talking about the recruitment of businesses, the site selector that worked on the AutoZone project had personal relationships with Carl, Adrian, and myself. We worked with him on a project, and this was early in my career. So we're talking like 12 years ago, and he came in and he fell in love with this community and he saw the value and the worth of this community. Unfortunately, the deal that he was working on, for those that have been with us, Project Grizzly, they weren't able to close that deal, but he's like, look, I love this place. I want to make sure that we bring a client because if you're making me happy, I know then I can make my client happy. And so, we're looking at 10 years after that, he came in, we got the AutoZone project, and it's great. And they're doing amazing things in North Pasco and for the Tri-Cities. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, Tracy, I think that's a great description. I think it kind of leads into the other things that we do in economic development, to work and partner to create more jobs. And that's, business retention and expansion, working with existing businesses that we have. But then also startups. And I think that when you think about like the attraction role, you got to realize that somebody like the site selector that you're talking about, like they have a set of criteria from their customers, which are these companies, and they're like, they have certain criteria that they might love our community and know that we're a great fit. But if they're looking for something that's regional, that's out of our region, if they're looking for something that has a specific infrastructure need that maybe doesn't line up with us, they're not able to bring that. When you talk though about the companies that are already here or the companies that may choose to start here, now we've already got a captive audience, right? Like they're already here. And so what can we do to align resources with them to help them grow or to help them, start their business here, develop markets, come up with ways to develop their product or anything else that we can do. Not that we're going to do it, but a lot of times what we do is networking and connecting, businesses to help them grow. But that's, I think, kind of part of the work that we do, and the difference in between that site selector, to set a goal that says we're going to bring in, another distribution company, or we're going to bring in another food processing company. And we're going to go hard sell somebody. Well, like if they don't grow the crop that they're going to process here, we're not going to get that company, right? I mean, we've got to be on recruiting. You've kind of got to meet these initial benchmarks and then go from there. But when the company's already here, that's where we can really, I think, bring more of what we can connect them with to bear on helping them grow their company.
No, I think it's so true. And we're almost on a scale because, the chicken before the egg, and it's like, wait, no. We can't do recruitment unless we have a solid already existing business level, right? So it's important that we can show the outside community, wait, no. These small companies can be very successful. If this company can be successful, then this company can be successful. And it creates this clustering effect on it. And so being able to help those small businesses, it's exciting. This year I haven't had a lot of time because we've been working on a lot of the grants and stuff, but I'm excited to start getting my hands dirty because there are so many cool things that are made here in the Tri-Cities, and to highlight that and to help them continue to grow, I think is just going to make our recruitment efforts, explode.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you brought up, Tracy, what you really did some amazing, incredible work on last year. And I wanted to bring that up because that's another role that TRIDEC had an opportunity to fill last year. And it wasn't one that we'd planned for or that, but in the International Economic Development Council, one of the roles that local agencies like ours play is disaster planning and resiliency and relief. And I think a great example of that's last year. So because we work with Department of Commerce, when we got into COVID and businesses were forced to shut down because of safety restrictions, Department of Commerce came to all of the associate development organizations like us throughout the state and said, start working with your small businesses. We have some funding through the Governor's Strategic Reserve Fund. And so, collectively try to quickly set up this program to start to do that. And we learned a lot through that process. And then as some of the CARES Relief Act came to our local counties, again, because we contract with them for economic development specific work, and we'd already done the initial grants, they asked us to set up the CARES grant programs for both counties. And Tracy, you led that for us, did amazing work. And, we still need to make up some hours for you because you put so much time into that, but did such an incredible job. I know that the businesses that received some of that money were able to stay afloat. Hopefully it wasn't, it didn't work for everyone. But I think the work that TRIDEC was able to do, and Tracy, that you really delivered, is a great example of that. That, because we have these capabilities, we were able to quickly pivot and start to do that. And I know that was critical for our business communities. About $8.5 million went out to small businesses through different state and federal funding sources throughout last year. And you really led that effort for us. So thank you.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And it wasn't just me. Tiffany helped us. And then all the partners with City of West Richland, with Benton County. I mean, Bobby Romine was, and Shirley Jones with Franklin County. I mean, we were rock stars, and, we became very close very quickly trying to manage these. But ultimately, we did it for the businesses. And good news is that round 4 for the Working Washington grants were announced on Monday. So hopefully the Tri-Cities businesses have gotten their emails and said congratulations. And I think that's really important to move, and especially as we go into reopening on June 30th, which is yay. So it's exciting to be able to do that. I wanted to circle back to a couple of things, because I think it's important that we talk about how BRE impacts recruitment. And I want to talk a little bit about 2 different businesses. So one is obviously Lamb Weston. And thanks to Lamb Weston, we are the frozen French fry capital of the world, which is amazing. And I love my French fries. So coffee and French fries, I'm super healthy. But because of that, we look at that and talking with Lamb Weston and saying, okay, what is it that we can do to help your supply chain work out better, right? So here it is not only are we helping a company like Lamb Weston, we can identify, well, we might be having some packaging issues. Well, what do you know? We were able to, with the work of the City of Richland, the Port of Benton, and they did the heavy lifting on that. But, now we have the PCA here. And I think it just makes it so important to see that the work that we do in one little part really helps do the business recruitment on the other side. So it really does, more evidence of it goes hand in hand, that we need to do it both at the same time to continue to be successful. And then the second company, Carbitex. Ron Boninger was on here a couple of weeks ago, and I really do geek out because that stuff is awesome. And, my kiddo plays soccer, and to see what they're doing with the cleats, and I have friends that ski, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But hello, it's made here in the Tri-Cities. Like, who even thinks about that? So it's so important that we focus on our small business, and obviously Carbitex is a small business. Lamb Weston is a big business, but the efforts that we do to help these companies grow really benefit the Tri-Cities as a whole.
That's a great point. And because I think Ron brought it up when we had him on, and we've talked about it before, but one of the ways that TRIDEC helped Carbitex grow was we do have some funds available, and with Carbitex, to I think cover some of the equipment costs as they grew into a new facility and added some new equipment. We were able to provide a low interest loan that helped them bridge some financing that help them grow. Ron's been very open about that as he talked, and same with Lamb Weston as they added more facilities, or the example that you gave, we were working on their supply chain. TRIDEC has had some incentive funds in the past that we've been able to leverage to help companies locate here, and sometimes that makes a big difference. That's another thing in economic development we talk about are incentives, and the state of Washington has a strategic reserve from the governor that he can apply to projects, and we don't have some of the tax benefits that other states do. You know, I came from Idaho, and they've got some pretty big property tax benefits that the Washington's actually working on adding some of them. But we do have some of these grants that we can work on, or low interest loans. And then I think that's the other thing, highlighting some of our partners that we work with that have access to the same, whether it's revolving fund loans or low interest loans that are really focused on economic development. You know, fortunate enough to sit on the Hanford Area Investment Fund, and I'm leaving part of their acronym out, but it's a specific fund that's funded from some dollars historically that built up that related Hanford cleanup that we have. And so bringing businesses in front of that, getting them access to that non-traditional financing, some of the stuff that we do at TRIDEC, and then, you know, like the Benton Franklin Council of Governments also has a revolving loan fund. So those are some of the other. Our role with businesses is to get out and talk to them and build a relationship with them, and not like we're trying to pry into their business, but what we want to do is say like, hey, we want to help you grow. Like, what can we do? Either knock down barriers, you know, maybe it's something aligning with some different financing options that you need, or different state or federal programs that we can help you get a grant to do that. And that those are great examples, totally, to help businesses grow, Tracy.
Yeah, right. So still kind of staying on the economic diversification, because it is the fun part, is that we're looking at kind of what really drives a company to want to locate here. And obviously, when we get our RFIs, RFPs, you know, the first thing is land. And so we have some really cool developments that we have here, and the communities are really getting behind it. So we have West Richland that has the racetrack property and surrounding around that. And with the, Eric, you're probably going to kill me, I think it's the Red Mountain development, Carl, if you can help me.
Maybe
Lewis and Clark Ranch. Lewis and Clark Ranch, thank you. They had a couple, so I apologize, Eric, that's on me. You also have the Horn Rapids Industrial out in North Richland, and that's with the city of Richland and Port of Benton. We have the Ryman Industrial Center, which is amazing, that just had their ribbon cutting. And then we have Vista Field and Kennewick, and the area that they're trying to do with the UGA expansion. And so why is having available land so important for site selection and retention as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, you know, when your mission, like we talked about before, for economic development, and our mission is growth. You know, you need more land and more sites to build new plants, expand one that you've got. You know, that's an interesting thing about like just general economic development in general. The type of site selection, you know, industries that you go after, a lot of times it is different in every community, and a lot of times it's history, right? Like when you go back generally in the Midwest and back in the East, they've got a lot of times where they're repurposing industries. You know, industries have changed over the years. They might have a lot of buildings that are empty and open. And so that's interesting. When we have these requests for proposals or information, a lot of times they'll say, hey, we're looking for an existing building that looks like this. The challenge that we have in that area in the Tri-Cities is that we don't necessarily have that existing empty building stock. You know, part of it is that our economy is growing so fast and so many people are moving here that it's hard to keep up with that commercial and industrial space. But then also the fact that relatively, you know, our history as far as economic growth and stuff only dates back to the Manhattan Project in World War II. Whereas some of these communities, you know, that we might be up against, maybe if it's not regional, might have buildings that date back 100 years or more, and not like it's an old crumbling down building, but it is about repurposing. So a lot of times it's really comes down to that. And the key about land is really about growth and being able to grow into those areas. And you know, infrastructure is such a critical part of that. Like, it's not just the land, it's like the natural gas, the electrical load that we can bring into this area, the sewer and the water. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of that, how critical it is in making a decision. Some of the projects we're actively working on right now, the feedback from the site selector and or the company that we're dealing with directly really come down to two things. Like, why are they choosing to either stay and grow in the Tri-Cities, or why are they choosing the Tri-Cities? One is infrastructure, you know, being able to deal with wastewater, you know, that's not like this heavily polluted wastewater, but it is wastewater that needs to be treated in some form or fashion. And the partners that we have from all of our cities that have wastewater treatment plants, Some of them even have industrial water reuse facilities, where they take industrial wastewater that might come from wineries that needs to be treated at a different level before it goes into sanitary sewer. The city's ability to be able to leverage that infrastructure to help us grow their business is huge. And that directly impacts one project that we're working on. Another one that we're working on that's really more of a retention. They're building a new facility because they're already here. They said the number one reason that they chose in the Tri-Cities and not open up a new plant in Kansas was because of the workforce, and workforce is such a critical issue in economic development right now, with the silver tsunami and the baby boom generation in the United States retiring now, where you're going to get your workforce and be able to meet those needs is a critical part of economic development and site selection. And so that was great feedback for us, for a company that said, yeah, I'm going to stay here because you've got the work I know is reliable. They'll show up, they do a great job, and they continue to grow, and they're great that we can provide training and upskill them. That's why we're staying in the Tri-City. So I think those are some huge advantages that we have.
Yeah, thank you. You did my 1, 2, and 3. So we're on it. I'm glad that we're on the same page. This is true teamwork, where through osmosis, Karl and I are speaking the same thing. And with workforce, we have such great partnerships. I mean, we literally attack these kids in the K-12 system, and we try and funnel them through TRIDEC. And I really hope for all the other parents out there, this is my plug for TRIDEC. If you have a child that's a junior or senior, you need sophomore now, going into their junior and senior year, you need to check out what's happening at TRIDEC, because this is literally giving these kids a once in a lifetime opportunity to taste test some different career opportunities. And it's absolutely amazing. So thankful that we have Paul Randall here running TRIDEC. So there's my plug for that. I should be honest and transparent. I do serve on the advisory committee, but before I served on there, I was a big proponent for TRIDEC and what it does. Our partnerships with CBC and WSU, it's just phenomenal. And what people don't understand is these are two organizations that are really working with the community to help structure their curriculum around what the workforce is needed. So props for that. And I can't go without saying all the cool things that are happening at the Vulcan Test Hammer facility, because that place is pretty awesome as well. So workforce
really
definitely.
No, for sure. And I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I think the other one is Benton Franklin Workforce Development Council.
Oh, definitely.
They're so connected into so many different programs that are just amazing. And so, their role within the education system that you just described, including Hammer and stuff, is amazing. And I think, what I think about for my kids, and this goes back to a job I had a couple of years ago where we were trying to connect kids with companies that needed future employees, so that while students are still in the K-12 system, they can start to see like, whoa, I could do that. And this is the education or training or apprenticeship program that I need to get into that'll align me with that job. But the breadth and width of industries and businesses that we have here in the Tri-Cities, right here in our 300,000 person metro area, is huge. And that's some of the things as we come out of COVID that we've talked about, and bringing all our partners together is to get kids out of the classroom and take them on tours, just to show them what those jobs are about. And I think I'll just relate it back to Coffee with Karl series, but a lot of our guests, we asked them, like, how did you get into, management of this huge company that has a major contract for cleanup at Hanford? How did you get to be the leader of Energy Northwest? And a lot of times, whether it was somebody that grew up here locally, like Bob Wilkinson from HMIS, or Brad Swatsky from Energy Northwest, Brad grew up in a town that had a nuclear reactor there, and he never thought that he was going to go do that. But because it was there, he kind of described like, well, I was kind of doing something and I needed a job, so I got lined up and I got this training stuff. Well, all of a sudden you're the CEO in another state of Energy Northwest, right? And same thing with Bob, but the proximity and the width, like I said, breadth and width of industries we have here, it's a huge opportunity. We need to get kids just aware of it, right? Because kids grow up here, don't realize how good they've had it. And we need to just get them thinking about that next step. Why should you go on college? Why should you go into that apprenticeship program? Why should you go into this training and certificate program? because you know a little bit about that job that you went and saw and it was really cool and that's something you want to do.
Yep. So all the moms out there that are crazy like me, and I'll help you find them locations here and jobs here. keep your babies close by. That's why I'm in economic development, to keep my one and only child close by. And yes, I am embarrassing him like majorly right now, but that's okay. So a couple other things that communities are being looked at, and we kind of touched a little bit about this, is innovation. And I look at the lab and everything that's been spun out at the lab. I look at Fuse, I look at the work that they're doing at the research district, the businesses that are there, and having innovation, it's looking at something a little bit different and solving a problem for it. And I think that's really important, that as a community, we focus on celebrating the innovations that are here. And then placemaking is my last one of why it's really important, because if we have workers that actually love living here, then it's going to be easier for companies that want to bring in workforce. An example of that is when Cascade Natural Gas was looking at moving their headquarters from the Seattle area to the Tri-Cities. And the Tri-Cities wasn't on their top 5 list, and which was sad, but then they're like, okay, we'll come out there. And it was a fluke thing that Bryson Bailey and Carl Adrian were out on at a trade show. And so I got to tour around the Cascade Natural Gas people, and it was such a great experience. And when they came here and we're showing them the different school systems and we're driving around different building developments, talking about the 15-minute commute, they were blown away by the vibrancy of the Tri-Cities. And, with Coffee with Karl, it's always nice to, and when I'm trying to talk with people, it's like, what can the community do? The community can help with placemaking. And I think it's so important, and it's that creating the love the tribe. Mike Denslow did a great job with Love the Tribe and embracing that, because everybody has a role in economic development. And it's not our partners, which we have a long list of them, but everybody takes on a serious role in economic development. And the funny thing is with multiple site selectors, they go in and they go to a local restaurant. They go into a coffee shop. AutoZone went into Walmart to make sure that their customers would be there, right? Because that's where they were selling to. And they were talking to people. So obviously, if some rando comes up to you and is like, what do you think of the Tri-Cities? Don't say, oh, it's so hot here. It's always windy. Because I think that's what gives people a negative perception on it. So it's so important to brag about the Tri-Cities. And we do have our 400 days of sunshine. It's breezy. That wind helps keep the temperatures down. It's nothing. Everybody looks better with windblown hair. So, it's so good. And I think that it's so important to remember that, and creating a community that's why placemaking is so important. And that's where people can have an active role in economic development.
Yeah, totally. I remember somebody, and it was actually back at a trade show in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, but another, economic development person I was talking to asked me, what's the difference, to your point about placemaking? And a lot of times that falls into this category of community development. And this person was asking me, like, what's your definition and difference between, economic development and community development? And I just said, well, I think that really, to do economic development, to attract companies and help companies stay here that are growing, you've got to have a community that people want to live in, right? So if community development, placemaking's over here, and economic development's over here, I think they're really the same thing. Like, you can't have one without the other. It literally is chicken and egg. And so, economic development, as we do it, and the examples that we've given, we focus on these base industries, right? The ones that bring dollars in from outside and then export products or services, outside of the community. And that's what we're really focusing on. But when we do anything in that community development side, it's totally connected to doing a better job in economic development. We've had Michael Novakovich on from Visit Tri-Cities many, many times, our downtown business partners from Pasco and Kennewick and Richland and even West Richland, like, what's going on with the cities? And when you think about this base industrial economic development, there's not necessarily a correlation, but when you look at the community, there totally is. And so to be able to partner with them and work on projects that they're working on, support them, help them get anything that we can to make this a better place to live, makes it a better place to visit, and the opposite, right? Like anything that somebody wants to come here and visit because of makes it a better place for us to live in. And it makes it a better place to show off to people that might want to move their company here or choose to stay here. So it's all really connected. That's what I love about our community, because even our name, Tri-Cities, like 3 cities when we're really 4 cities, and then the broader region doesn't really represent who I think we are, because we're really one community. And we know that there are, political jurisdiction boundaries and everything else, taxing districts, but in reality, we're all about the tri, and it really is one tri, to your point. And that makes it easier for us to sell to companies outside the area and to keep companies here, and ultimately working together to try to make it an even better place to live.
Agree, 100%. I mean, and since you're CFD, I mean, that's law. So what you say is law. That one community is so important, and we are really fortunate. And each individual city brings a different flavor to this giant melting pot of the Tri-Cities. And something that people might not realize is when we talk about the Tri-Cities as a whole, we're talking about Benton and Franklin County, because our metropolitan statistical area, the MSA, represents all of Benton and Franklin County. And so that's going all the way out to Prosser and to Benton City and to West Richland and to Richland, Kennewick, and then through Pasco into Connell. And so we represent everybody here, and we're doing our job, and we're advocating for everybody, not just focus on the core of it, but for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, whether it's somebody that's new that we're, kind of showing the community off to show that urban for us, right? I mean, somebody coming from Seattle or New York is not going to think that we're urban, but urban and rural, small town, out in the country, just that diversity of lifestyles is a huge strength for us. And I know Carl Adrian, I've heard him say it before, and I think it's really true. It's kind of my heritage, coming from farm towns and logging towns and stuff, but we've still got that agrarian base, right? That farming base. And there's this implication that if you grew up on a farm or you're in that industry and you understand what that's like, you know what it is to wake up every morning and work hard, but then solve problems, right? I mean, there's that thing, and we bring that that niche to the party when it comes to all the things that we do, and I think that's what really represents us. We had a meeting last month where we bought the CEO of X Energy, one of the new advanced reactor design project winners, building a new small modular reactor at one of the Energy Northwest sites here in the next 6 and 7 years. And they signed an agreement between X Energy, Energy Northwest, and Grant PUD. So Grant PUD came down with a couple of their commissioners from their board, and then their CEO, Kevin Nort. And we had a whole day worth of meetings, and one of the commissioners, who I forget his name right now, but a really cool, distinctive mustache, good guy, he said at the end of it, we were talking, and he goes, I hadn't really come down and met you guys before, but I like how you run your meetings. You get stuff done, but you're not kind of a bunch of stuffed shirts sitting around the table. And I said, well, it's because we're all really still in a small town, and we're small town people. We might live in this bigger area, but we all have relationships and we all work together. And I thought that was good feedback about the Tri-Cities, like the people that he met, and he was just up, from Grant County, but I think that's really representative of who we are and how we do business.
And Energy Northwest, it's such a great story. When we were celebrating TRIDEC's 50th anniversary, the Tri-City Herald ran this amazing piece. And so looking at it this morning of kind of prepping for today, and it's exciting that, now I gotta find it, about what Energy Northwest in 50 years is that TRIDEC worked on getting the Columbia Generation Station started. And now we're on that next phase with X Energy and a small modular reactor, and all within 50-ish years. And I think it's something that we should celebrate as a community. Like, this is awesome that we're doing that. And so we're going from the old to the new and transitioning into it. And I think it's just amazing. So being able to be a part of something that's going to be changing the world and multiple times, right? Our heritage is really, really set into place of we do life-changing, world-changing things here in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great example. And I think another one that we want to make sure we highlight is, you talked about it before, Tracy, Pacific Northwest National Lab. Like it, and you know, I can just say, coming from communities that didn't have the Pacific Northwest National Lab, and before I came to work here, I remember meeting with a department manager from Idaho National Lab, you know, that I had worked with before in the past, and she made the point of, she goes, PNNL is incredible, and you know, INL is kind of known as like the nuclear lab within the DOE lab system, but she goes, PNNL is amazing because of like the diversity of areas in science that they're working on. And I mean, she was kind of indicating that maybe she was a little bit jealous about it. And then,
She
you know,
should
for
be
me to get a
jealous.
chance to come down here, yeah, exactly. It's just such an incredible, you know, both economic driver, like we said, because of the jobs that they have there, the diversity of people they bring to our community, which is huge, which helps us as a community, adds so much to who we are as like the fabric and flavor of the Tri-Cities. But then the opportunity for what they're doing, things like the grid storage launch pad, really put us on the map. I mean, there's so much discussion and work now on energy storage. PNL is the leader of that, and in so many other areas. But you know, the potential to grow businesses out of there, to work with their commercialization team, to help bring in companies. They're already bringing in companies, but how can we help them, you know, establish a foothold in the Tri-Cities and start to set up manufacturing and those things? Like, it's a huge opportunity for us that is going to continue to provide, you know, return on the investment that the federal government's making, and PNL and Battelle are making here locally. You know, I can't say enough great about that potential. And there's so much technology that they're developing. This is what I love too, because there's such a local tie-in with our agriculture industry, with our food processing energy. I mean, they're working on technologies where we can take, you know, agricultural biomass, what's left over that today might be, you know, part of the mix that gets used as fertilizer or cow feed or something like that, but repurpose it into biofuels or into, you know, other energy producers. And then maybe even better, you know, food sources for cattle production or things like that. Like, it's not just this energy thing, but PNL represents so many opportunities for us, and to tie in our existing industries and the community that we have. I just can't say enough. So I could probably spend an hour just talking about PNL, but
I know, I'm getting so excited. I'm like, I hope people that are watching, it's like, you should be excited about the cool stuff that is happening here in the community. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, PNL released a story that they're working on sensors to read your shoes, so you don't have to take off your sneakers when you go through. And when you do the PNL salute,
right.
If my camera's not too close, at the airport. And so it's just the stuff that's coming out of that. And the thing is, though, it's just not happening at PNL. I mean, you look at SIGN, the Surgical Implant Generation Network, and what they're doing to do life-saving surgeries in third world countries, amazing. Gene Dillner, amazing. Dr. Zirkle, amazing. And that stuff that's what's happening here in the community. And we didn't even like get on talking about wine and distilleries and all that other stuff. I mean, you have the talent that's here, and we have the quality of product and ingredients that are here. So I really hope that everybody can pick up on our passion for the Tri-Cities and carry that forward, because that makes our job a lot easier when everybody's happy and passionate about the Tri-Cities. So one asks, just be happy that we live here and be happy that amazing things are happening here. We have like 4 minutes left, and I'm so sorry, Karl. We did not get a chance to talk about the cool things that are happening. Like, what's our future? So,
you know, we hit on some of them. Yeah, we talked about PNL, but I think for all of us, Tracy, it's about taking our existing industries, the new industries that we can add, and then, you know, putting them all together, right? Because I think that's what people are concerned about. Like, oh, you're just doing nuclear, you're just doing federal stuff or Hanford things. But we want to make sure that we're representing the whole Tri-Cities and projects that can either highlight each part of that in our industries and businesses, or how can we tie them all in together? But we talked about nuclear. I think the great thing about nuclear is we are, you know, one of the homes. I mean, when the B reactor went online, it was literally one of the first sustainable reactors. I had a chance to spent some time, David Replog and I on our team, with Bob Ferguson, and what an amazing guy. I mean, he's forgotten more about nuclear power in the Tri-Cities than maybe other people will ever know. But to talk to him about understanding some of the history and then some of the ways that we can capitalize on that history and move forward, it's just a huge opportunity, because the reality of it is, as we take carbon out of our atmosphere, especially with electrical production that the state of Washington is going to do by 2045, wind and solar are fine and great and renewable, and the price is coming down, but we can't predict when they're going to make power, and we need power. That's one of the challenges that we have right now, bringing new companies in, is because our power through local utilities and city utility districts comes from Bonneville Power Administration, which mainly comes from hydropower. They're not building any more dams, and they're not adding much more electrical capacity. So when we bring somebody in that needs more electricity, how are you going to get it? And how do you make it predictable and reliable? And ultimately, in carbon free, that's going to come down to either energy storage or nuclear. And so, we are well poised in nuclear to really continue to be a leader in that. And there's about 10,000 other things that we could talk about.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
We should have really had like 5 hours to talk about economic development.
I don't know if anybody would stay involved for 5 hours, but we'll give it a shot. We'll try to be exciting.
Yeah, everybody should be excited. I do want to share my screen just for a second, because I want to talk about our partners. And I just want to clarify that TRIDEC doesn't do this alone. And we have to have our support system, like everything. It literally takes a village, a tribe. I'm not quite sure what's the best explanatory word for adjective, but we are so grateful for our ecosystem here. And it's made of the cities, it's made out of the counties, the ports, Visit Tri-Cities, all of the chambers, SBDC and SCORE, BFCOG, Workforce Development, Fuse and Makerspaces, the downtown associations. And as much as we're celebrating the cool things that TRIDEC is doing, these individual organizations, they're doing the same cool things, and they're being innovative, and they're helping, and they're trying to make the Tri-Cities a better place. So, if you know of anyone that works for these organizations, tell them thank you, and say thank you so much for keeping us different and diversifying and just making the Tri-Cities of what it is. Because when we all work together, it's amazing the things that we can do, and so grateful for them.
And I just want to make one last point. I know I'm going to belabor it, but I think because in my career I've done marketing before, and in marketing you learn you always have to answer the so what question. Okay, you're trying to sell me this thing, but so what? Even if you don't understand what we're talking about or buy into the need for economic development, or maybe you're oh, we don't want more people moving here because our streets are too crowded, or whatever your point may be, there's a huge reason for economic development, and that is the tax base, right? I've come from communities that don't have enough industrial and commercial tax base, and they put too much of the burden of property tax on residential homeowners, and your property taxes go up because ultimately we have to pay property tax, as an example, to get services. And we have so many services, from the amazing schools that we have here to the park system, let alone our infrastructure and first responders from fire and police services and everything else that the tax base supports. But growing the tax base on non-residential users essentially lowers our property tax rates as homeowners. And it's a huge thing that we don't talk enough about, but that's a huge reason why economic development is so critical, is to keep our taxes affordable for everybody in our community while we continue to grow the great services that we rely on for part of our quality of life.
I thank you for making that. I think it is so important. And as you're driving down your roads and you're not going, blah, 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 that's what economic development is for. You go into some of these other congested areas and you're hitting pothole after pothole. No, we're doing it right here in the Tri-Cities, where very few places, and yes, they do exist. So please don't hit me up and well, have you been down this road? Yes, I know it exists here. But this is what we're doing. All of our parks, all of our trails, everything, that's our purpose. So
yeah, great point. And looks like it's time to go. So I'm gonna go back to I know the things that Carl Adrian, my predecessor, who did such an amazing job for our community, can't think of enough, always talked about when you have these economic development talks. And Tracy, I know you've given them as well, but three things about economic development. It's a process, it's not an event. I mean, we love that big ribbon cutting everything, but predicting when that's going to happen it really comes down to doing the things that we know that are right, that we just talked about today. We do it every day. And so it's a process. It's not an event. It is everybody's business. We just gave the property tax analogy. I think that's a good one. Why everybody should care about it, and why we should answer the, so what question. And it really is a team sport. The ecosystem slide you just put up there is really representative. And so when we talk about TRIDEC does this, TRIDEC does us, it's not just you and me and the rest of the TRIDEC team or our board of directors. It's everybody that you talked about, because we're really all in this together. And so TRIDEC, that's our goal, is to represent the community. When we say TRIDEC does this, it's all of us working together.
Yeah, definitely. And remember, what you say matters. And when you love the Tri-Cities as much as we do, it shows. And it really, I know it sounds really corny, but it'll make people want to live here. So I think continue celebrating that, and celebrating this week, and going out and doing your fun things. Last week was tourism week, and just keep going. When you run into people that are doing cool things, thank them for that, because it's like a magnet, and it's going to start attracting more and more. So yeah. So thank you for coming on with Tea with Tracy. If it was at 4 o'clock, maybe it'd be Tequila with Tracy. So since it's at 9 a.m., it is Tea with Tracy. And the next week we'll be back with an all new Coffee with Karl. So I'll be on the back end again. So thank
Tracy,
you.
Good. Well, I want to say good job putting this together. We kind of made it up on the fly, but I think it worked out really well. And just, you're doing a great job. All of our TRIDEC team directly on our team's doing a great job, and all of our partners. And again, thanks for picking me to be the new CEO. And, we can't say enough great things about the Tri-Cities and how much we love doing our job and representing for all of us. Thanks for putting this together.
No, thank you for being here, and thanks for being a great speaker. So yeah, it's been great. So you guys enjoy the beautiful day today, one of our 400 days of sunshine. So bye, y'all.
Bye. Thanks, Tracy.